All right, welcome back to another economic lecture. This particular economic lecture is going to be a lecture about markets and how supply and demand are used as tools to analyze markets. So here on the board, we've taken the liberty of drawing a supply and demand curve. Let's review the important points about supply and demand before we get into this specific market. So on the vertical axis, we have P for price. That's the price in the market. And on the horizontal axis, we have Q for quantity bought and sold. That's the quantity in the market, right? Then we have our downward sloping demand curve, labeled D. So remember, our downward sloping demand curve shows us the inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. As price of a item, a good or service or a resource goes up, quantity demanded goes down, right? And vice versa, price goes down, quantity demanded goes up. We call that the law of demand. Right? In a previous lecture, we went into the reasons for the law of demand. We also have our upward sloping supply curve, which shows the direct relationship between price and quantity supplied. Right, so price goes up, sellers are willing and able and happy to produce and sell more, and if price goes down, sellers want to sell less. Right? So when we see a graph where the supply curve and the demand curve intersect, we call that equilibrium. And we have labeled that E1, creatively E1. Right? So at E1 we have price level, labeled that P1, and a quantity. So right now that's E1. And this is pretty much the way every single solitary supply and demand curve market analyzation will start, right? So we could write any market up top, but we're going to write down automobiles. So we're going to analyze the auto market, right? So this is the market for automobiles. And this is large, small, medium-sized automobiles. It's just a generic automobile market. So right now there's an average price of P1 in the automobile industry, and there's an average quantity bought and sold. Let's say bought and sold per month, because remember, when they're talking about supply or demand markets, they're always used to analyze a market for a specific amount of time. So there's a specific amount of time here. Let's say this is 1 month's worth of automobiles bought and sold. Well, we took the liberty of writing up what happened recently in the automobile market. What recently happened is that the price of steel increased. Now back in the 50s and 60s, and I guess even around the early 70s, steel was one of the most important inputs for making cars. Cars were mostly made of steel. Now, of course, there's a lot of plastic materials included in cars, right? But steel is still an important input for producing cars. So it's a necessary resource. It's a factor of production. So first, the price of steel increases. So we say, okay, after that, what non-price determinant do we identify? The non-price determinant we identify is that the increase in the price of a resource, an input, right? And just so everybody knows, we're going to write this in parentheses next to this. Right? This is a non-price determinant of, right next to input, we're going to write down supply. It's a non-price determinant of supply, because a resource or a factor of production. So there's an increase in the price of a necessary resource. Right? Then we're going to creatively take a different color pen, and we're going to draw what happened on our graph because of the increase in the price of a resource. So we're going to take our red pen, because that green pen doesn't draw so well. I know this from experience. Right? Now we're going to draw a leftward shift. Now, it doesn't matter if we're talking about supply or demand. A decrease will always be a leftward shift of the curve. So here we have a leftward shift, our beautiful noise there. And we're going to label that S1. Right? And at the new S1, the new supply curve, we have a new equilibrium. We're going to creatively call that E2 for equilibrium 2. So what happened now? Let's draw our dotted lines into our new equilibrium. Label them Q2 and P2. So at Q2, P2, right? Well, obviously here the price in the market went up from P1 up to P2, and quantity bought and sold went down. So we're gonna record our results on the right hand side. We're gonna write down results. We're going to do this quickly because we're running out of time on the video. Now we're simply going to write down price up, quantity down. And we are finished. Now in another later lecture we will analyze markets where there's a simultaneous shift in both supply and demand and talk about that, or we'll just analyze some other markets. But that gets us off to a good start.